Now let's look at applet programming. Applets are client-side web-based programs. So what is your client-side program that you run on your machine? It's nothing but a browser. So applets therefore run on your web browsers. To write an applet, you write a public class. You must write a public class. And this class extends from the applet class. Applet class resides in java.applet package. So you need to import the applet package. Applets have their own life cycle. The life cycle of an applet starts with the init method, goes to a start, then to a paint, stop and destroy. This is the life cycle of an applet. In this life cycle, the init and destroy of an applet gets executed only once in a lifetime, whereas start, paint and stop gets executed every time the applet comes into focus. It's the start and the paint. Every time the applet goes out of focus, the stop gets executed. Now when does an applet come into focus and goes out of focus is considered, depends on browser. So this goes into a loop. All these methods, where do they come from? Now if you look at an applet hierarchy, it starts with the object class. Here we have a component, container, panel, and then applet. Now if an applet is going to run in the web browser, a web browser is a UI based, so your applet also has to be UI based. It's also a visual component. Now an applet is going to reside in your web browser. Depends on where you specify to load the applet using the applet tag. So since an applet is going to be loaded into a web browser and this applet itself can contain other contents, like you can write onto an applet, you can have an applet having buttons, text fields, etc. So an applet has to be a container. Therefore if you look at it here, an applet is derived from a panel. A panel is nothing but a container. So an applet is a container. These lifecycle methods come from this particular hierarchy here. That is, the init, start, stop and destroy come from the applet class, whereas the paint comes from the component class. Now all these methods are instance methods of their associative class, which means they're all methods which have to be accessed using an object of the class. So all these methods we are inheriting onto our applet class when we derive from class applet. Now if these methods are instance methods, and I'm going to start my execution of an applet with the init method, I need to have an instance of this class, of my applet class. I'm just going to write my applet class. I'm not going to create an instance of an applet class. So who's going to create an instance of my applet and invoke the start, init, start, paint, stop and destroy methods? your applet class instance is created by the JVM. The JVM creates your applet classes instance. So how does the JVM create your instance of an applet class? It does a reflection on your class using the reflection API. Remember that every class that is loaded into the JVM, an instance of class is created for it and stored in the hash table. The JVM uses that class instance, calls the new instance method of class, which ends up creating an instance of your class. So you get an instance of your class. Using that instance, the JVM calls the init method. After the init, it calls the start, then it calls the paint. After that, it waits. Of course, apart from these methods, you can have your user-defined methods, which can be called through these lifecycle methods. These lifecycle methods will be called in the lifetime of an applet, but it's not a must for you to implement all these lifecycle methods in your applet class. It is your wish which methods, lifecycle methods of an applet that you might want to implement. All these methods have been implemented in the parent classes as do nothing methods. That is, just open a bracket and close the bracket of the method. So let's look at how to write we'll write the lifecycle methods in our applet class and execute it. Please note one thing again, if the JVM should be able to create an instance of your applet class, the applet class must be public. If you do not provide the public keyword for your applet class, you will end up getting an exception at runtime when you run your applet, that is, could not instantiate exception. It does not matter in which sequence you write these lifecycle methods. But also remember that since the JVM is going to create an instance of your applet using the new instance method of class, the only type of constructor that the new instance method calls is the default constructor. So if at all you are going to provide a constructor in this class, provide only the public default constructor. I am just going to write to the console some message in each of the lifecycle methods. Now this is our applet class depicting all the lifecycle methods. We have defined the init, start, stop, destroy and paint. And notice that the paint method takes a graphics object as parameter. Now this graphics is a class which is an abstract class in the AWT package. So you need to also import java.awt package. Now if you look at this, we have a SOP all throughout except in the paint method. If you want to display anything on a UI, on any UI, then you need to use the graphics class's drawString method to display any message. And this drawString method takes 3 parameters, that's a string message to be displayed, followed by x comma y coordinate on your UI starting from the left top hand corner of the UI where you want to display the message. Now, if that is the case, we know that we are writing an applet, and we know an applet is a UI because it's running on a web browser. And if we are going to display using SOP system.out.println to the console, where is it going to display? Now, in your browser view option, you have Java console option there. If you click at the Java console option, all your SOPs get displayed out there. So why aren't we displaying directly on an applet? Why are we displaying on to a console in these methods? Now, if we want to display it onto a UI, we need the graphics object. Of course, graphics we said is an abstract class. But there is a method called getGraphics in the component class which returns a graphics type of reference. Now, you could call the getGraphics method, get the graphics object here to draw a string. But what happens in here is that till the start method is done with its execution, the applet is not completely loaded. So even if you do a drawString, you will not be able to see it. So that's why we are using SOP here. And of course, stop gets executed and destroy gets executed once the applet goes out of focus or once I close the applet. So again, there is no point having to say drawString here because it's out of focus of a UI. So that's why we are using SOPs here to display. In order to execute this program, you compile as usual like you did your application programs by saying javac myapp.java. So you get myapp.class. Of course, since this is a public class, the name of the file should be the same name as the class name. So you get myapp.class file here. Now you need to write a HTML page, and in the HTML page you need to call an applet, because remember you're going to run it on a browser. Browsers understand HTML pages, right? You need to render using the HTML page. So the HTML page will look as follows. You will have your HTML tag and the rest of the HTML, whatever other tags that you might want to write. And at whichever point you write your applet tag, that is where the applet is going to appear on the browser. You cannot say that I want this applet to appear at a particular position. It's just that at whichever point you are writing the applet tag, that's where it appears. So applet takes as a must 3 attributes: attribute code, width and height are a must. What is this width and height? Applet we said is a container. So for a container you should specify how big the container should be. So that's the width and height out here. Using the code attribute, you specify the name of the applet class. If you want, you can place the applet class into a package by specifying a package statement out here. Okay. So if you have a package statement, then you specify package name dot the class name, otherwise just specify the class name to the code attribute. So here I'm just going to say my app. Width and height again is in terms of pixels. So let's say 300 by 300 is what I want to specify. Slash applet. Applet is a container element. That means there is a begin element and a end element. And then end your HTML, you can have your other HTML tags after the slash applet as well. So let's call this HTML file as first.html. It can be any name, doesn't matter. Now what you do is, you have the compiled code, you have your HTML file, you go to the browser, open to the HTML file. When you open to the HTML file,